All right, Brian, in part three of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're talking about our top 10 secondaries in college football. Now, this is something that we've been doing to go along with our position previews for Notre Dame. Once we kind of cap off a group, we talk about some of our top 10 units. Now, there's still some that we have to do. Thankfully, we have an entire offseason, almost an entire offseason left of time for us to get through a lot of those rankings. But today, we're focusing on the top 10 secondaries now that we've talked about Notre Dame's cornerback room and their safety room. And this was a fun list to put together. And, once you guys start to see things unfold, I think that there's a relative gap between the first 2-3 teams and some of the rest of the list. Some of our criteria. Yes.
Of the no's. Yes.
Yep. Some of our criteria was different. Like any list that Brian and I put together, we have some identical similarities in our list, and we also have some that are pretty different, give or take a couple of margins here. So, Brian, before we kind of dive into this list, what was some of your criteria in putting your top 10 together?
So, to me, it is a projection of what I think of what we know right now, projecting what will be the best. Meaning, what we know right now is I can't project that some kid who never played for somebody is going to go out and be a star this year. I could have predicted that Tay Johnson was going to be a pretty good player. I don't know that, there's other times where it's like a guy breaks out and you're like, yeah, I didn't see that one coming. Or, there's so this transfer from a school that here's Notre Dame's had an example like this. Who going into 2022, we talked about how Javonte Jean-Baptiste can really help Notre Dame. But honestly, who thought he was going to be a double-digit tackle for loss guy going into 2023? We knew he was going to help Notre Dame. We knew he was going to be a player, but did we really know that he was going to be what he was? No, I don't think that's fair. I don't think you can honestly in good conscience say that, Trev. I don't know that you can say that. And so those are the kind of guys that you can't really project. So there's always going to be some of that. Somebody gets injured that we don't see coming right now. So this is a projecting of who do I think is going to be the most impactful secondary rooms. That includes knowns and unknowns. That looks more at, okay, here's where I think you are. Here's what you landed. Here's who's stepping into lineups, maybe projecting what certain guys are going to do. Looking at it that way and just saying, hey, here's who I think the best groups are. And some of this will change. We may redo rankings in the summer if spring things happen that kind of oh, wow, that kid stepped up and we may. We're not going to redo it just to do it. We'll give our top 10 list. And if it's dude, it's still the same, we won't do another show on it, and we may do some written stuff on it. But it's really just about, ranking the best. And best to me includes you've got to have some known commodities. You've got to have some proven production. You have to have talent. I have to trust that you're going to be coached well and schemed to get the most out of that talent. It's not a rivals ranking list. We don't go through and say, okay, well, who has the most 5 stars? Who has the most this or most that? It's okay, yeah, you were a 5-star, but you haven't done jack in college yet. So I don't really care that you're a 5-star. I want to see what you are now. And just looking at the best groups, depth matters to me. Looking at this as an entire secondary, not just, okay, you have the best cornerback room, but your safeties are a hot mess. You're not going to rank as high. Or you've got 2 great safeties, but your corners couldn't cover me. Okay, then you're not going to be ranked as high. It's about the entire room as a whole and projecting who we think are the best of what we know about these teams right now. And this is probably the one we had the most pretty significant disagreement. We not only had 3 teams different each guy, but even some of the teams we had in there after the first 3, we have a pretty good variance of ranking. So this will be a fun one to kind of go through as we kind of explain what we see in the various groups. So we'll bring it up, Trev, and we're going to do it a little bit different. Instead of doing 5 at a time, we're going to go 1 each and just explain our lists. And then what we'll do is, I won't argue with Trevor about his ranking. He won't argue about mine. What we'll do is, number one, if you guys have some questions about our rankings, feel free to ask them. We'd love to hear your guys' rankings if you've thought about it. Or if you have questions, hold on, we've got a Miami fan in the chat, right? We've got an LSU fan in the chat. We've got an Ohio State fan in the chat. if you want to understand better why don't we have your group higher or lower or whatever, feel free to ask. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of ask each other questions sort of at the end about it and maybe have a further just discussion about it. We'll also talk about some teams that we think, okay, they're not there now, but they have a chance to crack the top 10 if some things can go their way. It's going to be a lot of fun, Trev. I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. The common themes that you're going to see in how I put my rankings together, it's two predominant things. I'm a big believer, and this isn't just experience. I'm a big believer in continuity in a secondary. What's one of the reasons why we have so much faith in Notre Dame secondary? It's because Leonard Moore comes back along with Christian Gray, who's a 2-year starter. It's because of Don Schuler and Tay Johnson come back. So continuity is a big piece for me in this, combined with talent, proven production, projection, a lot of different things. But as you'll notice, the common theme of mine is continuity. It's not just experience, because there's secondaries that I left out of this list that have guys that are coming back for year 4 in the rotation or year 3 as a starter. Continuity is a big piece in mind. But with that in mind, getting started with my top 10 list, Brian, I actually have the Houston Cougars at number 10 overall in mind. This is a very slept on team, and one that you and I talked about for a little bit when we were kind of prepping for the show. When people hear about the Big 12, they think of Texas Tech and BYU. Understandably so, I get it. Arizona State gets brought up more in conversation than what Houston does. Again, I get it. Arizona State's a year removed. But I like what they bring back here, man. You go through and you look, they returned 3 starters from 2025. Jordan Allen is a former LSU transfer. He's going into year 2 at safety. Kentrell Webb is a former Tulane guy. He's going into year 2 at safety. And then Will James is a Southern Miss transfer who's going into year 2 at cornerback. So all 3 of those guys are going to be relied on to kind of shore up the back end of this defense. And they're now going into year 2 of the system being at Houston. And those 3 guys are big reasons why their defense kind of had a little bit of a turnaround. Now, when you go and look at their season-end stats, they're not going to blow you away and be like, oh, I get it. Houston just wasn't talked about, but they were the 11th best pass defense in the country. But I think they have the opportunity to be a top 25 pass defense this year with the type of talent they have coming back. So I got the Cougs at number 10 for me.
I know we said we're not going to comment on each other's list, and I'm not going to really comment on it. I'm just going to say Willie Fritz is a freaking heck of a football coach. He really is, dude. Like, he got Houston turned around way quicker than I thought he was.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And quietest 10-win season in the country last year. Just don't get a lot of respect. It's a great analysis, Trev. My number 10 unit, I hate to say it, but I've got to be honest, is the Michigan Wolverines. I really like this secondary. If I knew more about how they were going to be utilized, if I knew more about, just is Rod Moore going to get back to his kind of peak form from the year before? Like, those are some of the questions that I have. But they had a couple things go well for him, Trev. Like, I know, for example, you have a little giveaway, but Trev has BYU in his top 10. Well, the guy that ran the defense last year to lead BYU to a top 10, ranking here is now coaching at Michigan, and Jay Hill. I think that was a great hire by Kyle Whittingham. I think that's going to help this defense. They have some guys, and the other thing that happened this season is Zeke Berry, the one of their corners, had initially, I can't remember if he said he was going to go pro, or if he was going to, I think he was going to go to the portal, and decided to come back. I think that was huge. And then the third thing that happened to them this offseason is they got Smith Snowden out of the transfer portal from Utah. He's going to be their nickel. So you've got Jair Hill coming back, who's, I think, one of the 10 best cornerbacks in college football. He didn't make the jump that a lot of people thought he was going to make last year. I thought he was fine. I thought a lot of the issues they had last year had to do with just this program as a whole was a train wreck. It just was. I think you're going to have stability here. You talk about continuity. That's important. I think stability is important. And there was none at Michigan. So Jair Hill's back. He's one of the better Big Ten corners. Zeke Berry's a very solid player. He's kind of like, for them, he's kind of like their Cody Riggs. Remember Cody Riggs for Notre Dame in 2014? Just steady, not a big name, not a dominant player, just kind of does his job. They've got good young depth. Losing Jaden Sanders hurt. Michigan helped Notre Dame. He started and played some games for them. I like their safety group. Rod Moore comes back. He's now a full year removed from the injury he had in 2024. That should help him kind of return to form. He's a good, solid, again, one of the 10 to 15 best safeties in college football. They've got a couple young kids that I think could be on the verge of maybe having breakout seasons and providing depth. That's Kanoa Winston, and that's Jordan Young. Jordan Young especially is a guy that I really like coming out. They went in the portal and had a really sneaky portal pickup, Trev, that not a lot of people talk about, and that's Chris Bracey, a safety from Memphis who had over 80 tackles, like 9.5 tackles for loss last year. Not a great cover guy, but I don't think Michigan's going to ask him to cover as much as Memphis asked him to cover. Really good downhill impact run defender type of guy that I think helps this secondary. So they've got experience, proven production, some high-level players, maybe not like the elite Leonard Moore type guys, but some really good football players. And they had some losses, like, Brandon Hillman left. They had TJ Metcalf, I think, was another safety that left, but they've got a lot coming back, and I love the newcomers they have. I think Michigan's going to have a really good secondary this year.
I like it. My number 9 team, I'm going with the Georgia Bulldogs down in Athens. Now, this was such an interesting defense to dive into. Last year, they finished like 60th in pass defense, and talk about yards, 55th in completion percentage, 20th in touchdowns. Some of it, like we know with Notre Dame fans, a lot of it was subject to their pass rush that they got. There were a lot of times where the back end of their defense was asked to cover for a really long time because they weren't able to generate a pass rush. That started to turn around towards the end of the season when they kind of turned their D-line loose a little bit, and we started to see some players come along. Now, they returned 3 starters from last year. KJ Bolden comes back at safety. Kyron Jones comes back at safety. But the player that I'm keeping my eye on is Ellis Robinson. He's a cornerback that was the FWAA Defensive Freshman of the Year, and then he was also on the Freshman All-American team along with Tay Johnson. So to give you an idea of what type of season Ellis Robinson had. He's going to be one of their better cover corners that they've had. Now, I know they've had some bigger named guys. Like they got what I think like the Julian Humphrey kid from Texas A&M. They had the Everett kid, but I really like Ellis Robinson. You combine that with some of their portal pickups. They also snagged Braylon Conley out of USC, Khalil Barnes from Clemson, Gentry Williams from Oklahoma, and Jamarlee Riddle from Fresno State. I think Khalil Barnes could potentially fit either into the safety rotation, or they might use him a little bit at nickel from some of the things I've read about where he might fit within the structure of that defense. So something to keep an eye on. But they use the portal to build out depth, add potentially 1 or 2 starters here and there. Georgia's one that I'm keeping my eye on. I have them at number 9.
Good stuff. My number 9, Trev, is the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma was one of those teams that I kind of had to go back and forth on a little bit, to be honest with you, to see how comfortable I really was going to be with this group. They did have some departures from last year. Eli Bowen had an injury plague season, missed 3 or 4 games. Peyton Bowen was a good player, but not a great player. There's a couple things I like about it. I think Cortland Guillory is a really good young corner. I think he's going to take another jump this year. I think Eli Bowen, from what I have read, is going to be back to full strength. He's a really good football player. He's healthy. Peyton Bowen's a solid player. Really is going to come. I love their depth. They've got good depth at cornerback anyway. Safety, it's really going to come down to who can kind of step into the starting lineup opposite Peyton Bowen and how well he play. And then really what it comes down to whether or not I'm going to – so, like, to me, I took sort of the happy medium with my ranking on Oklahoma. I think you could make a case that if everything goes perfectly for Oklahoma this year, they should be ranked higher. But I also think that if there's enough ifs with Oklahoma, that they could also be ranked lower. So I kind of found a middle ground, and I'm putting them 9. If Peyton Bowen gets back to kind of – if Peyton Bowen can get to become a consistent player, not be a flashy guy, but a consistent player, then I think he is going to be a factor. I love their young corners. I really do. They got good nickel play. Safety is the big question mark for me. That's what has them down there. But I think Peyton Bowen has enough talent that look, if the other position can get solidified, I think it's going to do well. And I think Oklahoma's going to have a really good pass rush this year, which is going to allow them to play this safety group to their strengths. And I think that's a big part of it as well. And they went to the portal more for depth players, as opposed to like going to the portal for, like, hey, we got to go to the portal for starters. They didn't really do that. And I think that's going to benefit them quite a bit. And I like the Oklahoma secondary. I really struggle with Michigan at 10 and Oklahoma at 9. And I mean, I'm still, even now, I'm still having like, man, it was real close between these two, and then also between the next couple teams that I had out. So there's a lot of debate to have there, but I like this Oklahoma secondary.
For a lot of the reasons that you just talked about, that's why I have Oklahoma as my number 8 team. I had a lot of back and forth internally about Georgia and Oklahoma. And what I ultimately came down to, and I understand that this is a ranking for secondaries, but I think Oklahoma is going to benefit more from a better pass rush than what Georgia is going to benefit from their secondary. Because
they'll have a pass rush.
yeah, it'll be existent. Yeah, man, I'm with you. Now, with that being said, I think that Georgia might have the best player of the 3. You could argue, or of the 2 teams, you could argue they might have the 2 best in Ellis Robinson and KJ Bolden.
Agree.
And so that's the battle that I had is, who's going to be the more productive, who's going to be the more impactful. But we have seen a very highly talented secondary get neutralized by a lack of a pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
You watch that happen in South Bend the first 3 games last year. So that's kind of what my deciding factor was between this. But I do like the returning production coming back for Oklahoma. Like you said, Peyton Bowen comes back at safety, Eli Bowen and Cortland Guillory. I think Cortland Guillory is going to be a dude this year.
Yes. There's a lot of the debate for who the best cornerback in the country is going to be going into 2027 when Leonard Moore leaves, because there's no debate right now, is going to be really fun when we look at some of these young kids like a Cortland Guillory, like some of the kids from Oregon we're going to talk about, Ohio State we're going to talk about, Notre Dame's got some young kids that are kind of coming down the pike. Going to be very interesting. And Cortland Guillory is one of those kids. Actually, I'll just hold off because I'm about to talk about a couple other of them here in a second. But yes, Trev, Cortland Guillory is going to be a really good football player. He was one of the reasons that I had them 9.
Yes.
I have less questions about him than because Eli just has to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
If he's healthy, they're great at. They got one of the 5 best cornerback rooms in college football if Eli's healthy. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yep, and that's why that's a big reason why we both have them close.
Yeah, man. I mean, very productive seasons. Those 3 alone combined for 15 pass breakups in 2025, according to Pro Football Focus. They ranked 6th in touchdowns allowed, 22nd in passer rating. So I'm very interested to see what they do. But the thing that separated them from Georgia for me was just the pass rush and the opportunities that are going to be available for Oklahoma's secondary compared to Georgia's.
Yep, love it. My number 7 unit, Trev, is the LSU Tigers. Very underrated secondary. And I understand why a lot of people are not going to have LSU in the top 10. Because they look at this, they look at the defense last year, they look at the numbers, they look at, okay, they gave up this many yards, the defense really struggled down this stretch. I think a lot of that had to do with just the turmoil within the program. And you talk about continuity. One of the smart decisions that Lane Kiffin made was keeping his defensive coordinator, Coach Baker. I'm not going to say his first name because I always get it wrong. It's Blake, correct? Okay, I always want to call him Bryce, and I have no clue why. But Blake Baker, getting him back was, to me, really smart. Because I don't think I think what it tells you is that Lane Kiffin looked at the team that he's played each of the last 2 years and said, the D coordinator ain't the problem. The head coach is the problem. And that's why he kept them. And I think he also looked at the fact they've accumulated some pretty talented young players. Now, the other reason that I can understand people not being high on LSU is because they lost their 2 best DBs, AJ Halsey and obviously Mansour Delane. Those are 2 really good football players. They're going to hear their names relatively early in the NFL draft. So why do I have them there? Because I think this unit is very talented and was woefully underutilized last year. And I thought they did some smart things in the portal. Here's where it begins for me, though, Trev. When you look at LSU and you say, why am I high on LSU? It really begins at corner. As we talked about, there's some really talented young corners that are coming along that we're going to be talking about is some of the who is the best once Leonard Moore's gone. DJ Pickett from Who Makes Leonard Moore Look Short is one of those guys. DJ Pickett, to me, is an absolute stud, Trev. And he came with all the fanfare. I don't care about that. I saw him play last year. And yes, he's a freshman that had a lot to learn last year, but he is a very, very talented football player. I think some of the struggles he had last year as part of the corner rotation, and I thought he was still pretty good as a freshman, but like a freshman, there were some ups and downs like Leonard Moore had as a freshman when you think back to his performance against Louisville in Georgia Tech. There was a couple games where maybe he didn't always play like a stud, and I think that DJ had some of those moments late in the year, especially the last couple games of the season. But you could see the God-given ability, Trev. You could see the talent. You could see the potential. You can see the playmaking ability. 3 picks last year. Also gave up 3 touchdowns according to PFF. So again, went through the ups and downs is what a talented freshman is going to go to. Going into year 2 with more stability in the program, a year under his belt, same defensive system, I think DJ Pickett has a big-time breakout season. And the kid opposite him is a good football player as well. I like the PJ Woodland kid is also a good football player, Trev. I think he brings a lot to the table for LSU as well. So I really like their cornerback duo. They've got good depth at the position as well. So it's not just those 2 guys. They went into the portal and, or they actually didn't go to the portal. They went into high school ranks and landed a stud freshman in Havon Finney. He comes in. He'll have a chance to be in the 2 deep right away. So this is a very talented young cornerback room. You've got Jakeem Jackson, who they got from the portal the year before, who gives them some depth. So I really like the room. And then the question then, Trev, is of what can make him be higher. It's really going to come down to safety. TaMarcus Cooley last year, did some good things for them, but also had some struggles last year. Made a lot of tackles. I think he was like 4th or 5th on their defense in tackles, but missed a lot of tackles last year and gave up 32 completions last year. So there's obviously some room for improvement, but I liked what I saw overall. And again, he was a guy, Trev, that was, going into his first year at LSU, first year in the system. He's transferred 3 times. He was started at Maryland, then transferred to NC State, then transferred to LSU. Well, he's now going for the first time in his career as a senior, redshirt junior. He's going to be in the same defense for a second year in a row. And I think that's going to help him a lot. And then they got Ty Benefield out of the portal. Now, he's not going to be like a star, but, man, that's an attitude player right there that LSU needs. That's a guy that's I'm going to come downhill, I'm going to hit you. He had over 100 tackles for Boise State last year. They've got good depth at the position. I really like this LSU secondary next season. I think it's going to be a more stable program. Year 2 of a lot of these players in the system, a lot of length, a lot of talent. I think this is going to be a really, really talented group of players and a productive secondary. They could be higher, in my opinion, when it's all said and done. I can also understand somebody like you saying, I got to see a lot more from them to put them in the top 10. This is probably my biggest projection ranking that I have in my top 10.
LSU is definitely on the cusp for me. Yeah. That's for sure. And we'll talk about that at the end. Yeah. I echo a lot of the same sentiment that you do. About
right. It's a lot of the stuff I said is about talent potential. The proven production isn't there yet. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I can understand why someone's going to put a lot of value on proven production is going to say, not yet. Totally get it. And that's why I say this is the biggest projection that I had to make in my top 10. This is the one where there is a lot of, okay, I think that these things are going to happen. Where at Notre Dame, it's like, well, I know what Leonard Moore can do. I know what Adon Schuler can do. I know what this guy can do. With LSU, it's like, I think all these guys are going to be really good this year, but the talent is outstanding, no doubt.
Absolutely. My number 7 team, and this is a team that I know that I'm going to look back on and be like, you know what, if we redo this in the summer, I think that they should be higher. But I have the Ohio State Buckeyes at number 7 for now. And there's a couple reasons why. I'm very open to admitting that I could very much see them significantly higher than this being somewhere in my top 5. When we do rankings like this, there's a lot of people that I see that put out lists like this that only focus on what's still there, or they only focus on what's lost. And for Ohio State, I did my best to try to find the in-between. Because as much as you can't only focus on what was lost, you do have to acknowledge it. And they lost what I believe to have been the best safety in the country last year. And Davis Igbinosun, who was a tall, lengthy corner who did improve from 24 to 25. We had a lot of jokes about him being, what did I call him, the holding king? Or something like that.
I always like Jack. I started thinking like the Dancing Queen song. And the holding king. That was very well done.
But he did improve from 24 to 25, so I can't ignore that loss. But with that being said, you also can't ignore what returns. They returned Jermaine Matthews at corner, who in 24, he played a little bit of nickel, especially with Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun locking down the outside. Last year, Jermaine Matthews played more of the outside cornerback position. He's now going into year 2 of that spot. And year 2 in the Matt Patricia defensive system. I think he's poised for a breakout type of season. The other cornerback that I'm keeping my eye on, who again, we talked about Cortland Guillory, and we talked about players that once Leonard Moore is gone might have a claim for one of the better cornerbacks in the country. Devin Sanchez is going to be in that conversation for me. That kid's really good. Now, didn't get to see it a whole lot in 2025. He played, so I don't want to paint this picture that it's all projection.
He wasn't the guy.
Exactly. But he's somebody that I projected to be my Big Ten freshman of the year on defense last year when we were talking about conferences. I think he's in for a big year this year. And they also returned Jalen McClain at safety, who was a very productive player for them. I had some questions about who was going to replace Lathan Ransom. Jalen McClain stepped in and was a really good counterpart to what Caleb Downs brought to the table. But now, similar to a Don Schuler's track record, it's now Jalen McClain's time to be that guy. Then I also like some of the pickups they had in the portal. They're going to be battling for spots in the rotation and in the starting lineup. You got Terry Moore coming over from Duke. If he can stay healthy, I really like that pickup. You got Cam Calhoun coming over from Bama, Earl Little Jr. coming over from Florida State, and then Dominic Kelly coming over from Georgia. So they have a lot of different pickups that are going to be in the mix, but I like the core of their secondary being McClain, Sanchez, and then obviously Matthews, who's coming back for essentially his third year in the starting lineup. So for now, I have Ohio State at number 7, but their ceiling is significantly higher.
Yeah. Did you basically rank them at the floor?
Yeah.
Because of that's what I had feeling. My number 7 team, Trev, is the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm a little higher on the Georgia Bulldogs for a reason that you actually stated and we agree on. They have 2 of the most talented players on the list. KJ Bolden, as a sophomore last year, had a breakout season. He was very good for Georgia, and still had sophomore moments, consistency, things like that. But that's going to happen when you're a sophomore. You go into your junior season, second year as a starter, third year in the rotation. Defense is going to remain the same. I think KJ Bolden is going to be a breakout, like, national player this year, and he's already getting a lot of that recognition because he was a 5-star recruit and all that kind of stuff. And I think there was a little bit more put on him early that was based more on reputation than it was what he did. You know, looking at people that would rank him ahead of a Don Schuler going into last year, was like, no. But he had a good year last year, 76 tackles, 5 breakups, 2 picks. And now you go into year 3 with the hundreds and hundreds of snaps that he now has under his belt. I think now he becomes what people were projecting he would be last year, which is a first or second team All-American contention at safety. Then you go to a corner. Now, Ellis Robinson had a very up and down season last year, but when he was good, he was really good. And, as Trev mentioned, as I've mentioned, like, he's the kind of kid that you look at and say, going into to 2027, he's going to be in the discussion for who's now the best cornerback in the country now that Leonard Moore's gone. Redshirt freshman season last year, and his highlight plays, if you just watch his highlight tape, you think he's one of the 5 best corners in the country. If you just watch the highlights. Now, Trev, he's got to clean up some of the other stuff. And I think Kirby Smart has a pretty good proven track record. By the time you get into year 3 in his system, you're going to be playing at your best fundamentally, talent-wise. The issue that Georgia had in 2024 against Notre Dame wasn't they weren't coached well. It was they didn't have the talent. Daniel Harris just wasn't that guy. Dan Jackson's a nice football player. He's not that guy. The difference now, when I look at these guys that are coming up, they've actually kind of restocked a little bit with their last few recruiting classes. Now they have some of those guys. Ellis Robinson, that is that guy. KJ Bolden is that guy. DeMello Jones, who's the nephew of former Notre Dame stud Deke Cooper, who had one of my favorite big goal line hits in Notre Dame history, and as a fan, he's going to start at corner. Raw, but very talented. Their talent, with all due respect to Dalen Everett, the talent of the 2 starters at corner is better now than it was in 2024. The question is, okay, can they get them to play more fundamentally sound. The issue they had last year was DeMello and Ellis would look like studs for 7 out of 10 plays. They a lot like Christian Gray, to be honest with you, where 7 plays they look like, dude, that's a stud. Then the 3 bad plays, you're like, you just got cooked because your technique wasn't there. You were late with your transition. You didn't execute your assignment the correct way technically, or you weren't sure where to go. That's kind of how I viewed both of those guys. And now they go into their 3rd years, and I'm like, okay, now I'm predicting that these guys are going to be absolute studs. And so now it comes down to, okay, those 3 guys are very talented. What's the rest of the secondary look like? And that's ultimately going to tell where they are. I like Rayshawn Dinkins at nickel. I think they can also play Khalil Barnes there. How that safety position opposite KJ Bolden gets worked out is going to determine whether Georgia is here, lower, or higher. If they're just good, then this is about where Georgia will be. That 5 to 7 range. If they can take a jump, then I think you can see Georgia jump into the top 4 range. And if they struggle there and the 2 corners don't have jumps in consistency, then you could see the Georgia secondary struggle. That just hasn't been the issue at Georgia. You know what I mean? Like, juniors don't often make a lot of technical mistakes, and the guys that you could point to are guys you could point to that had constant discipline issues at Georgia. I haven't heard any of that with DeMello Jones and Ellis Robinson to the degree that we've seen with some past guys, KJ Bolden, guys like that. So I think this is their most talented secondary in a few years, just across the board. Now it's about, can you get them to play with more consistency? And then they went to the portal for some solid veterans for depth. You get Braylon Conley out of the portal. You get Gentry Williams from Oklahoma. Gives you a nice depth player. So they've got really good depth. Zion Branch is a really good veteran player, for depth that you got from USC. So 2 years ago. So I like this secondary. High-level talent, sound coaching, a lot of depth, a lot of experience. I think this Georgia secondary is going to be, I think, the best part of their defense this year, with all due respect to their linebackers. I could see their secondary emerging as the best unit. Right now, I think the linebackers are what I would say right now is their best unit. There's a chance that the secondary could be in the battle for them as we get into the season, if the talent turns into consistent production.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. We've talked about a lot so far this offseason, especially once the over-under win totals on FanDuel came out, that our friends over at FanDuel think that Notre Dame is one of the few teams in the country that have the opportunity to go undefeated. Their over-under win totals are set at 11.5. And if there's going to be a secondary not named Miami that I think could give them a run for their money, it's my number 6 team, and it's the BYU Cougars. I think this is a very underrated secondary, and I think that there's a stigma around BYU that some people have, some people might not have, that it's, well, they're just all older, veteran, sound, disciplined guys. And while some of that is true, I think that they have good talent in their secondary. Now, could I be reaching a little bit with 6? Potentially, but I'm high on them because they bring back some really productive players to their group. I mean, look, man, they returned 3 of their best defensive backs from last season. Evan Johnson and Taron Alexander come back at corner. And then Faletau Satula, I'm sure I'm butchering that name, is coming back at safety. Satula led the team in tackles in 2025, then also had 3 interceptions to boot. And then Evan Johnson had 5 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. And then Taron Alexander had 1 interception and 4 pass breakups this past season. Now, look, I know we clown BYU a lot for, how badly they got beaten against Texas Tech, but I don't think it was because of their cornerback room. I don't think it was because of their secondary. Baron Morton had 2 of his lesser performances in terms of completion percentage, passer rating, and yards per attempt when they played BYU secondary. He threw for 215 yards against BYU in the Big 12 championship on 33 attempts. The first time they played, he threw for 219 passing yards on 32 attempts. And so this is a secondary that isn't willing to give up too many big plays. I like a lot of the experience that they bring back. I'm sure it brings Kalani Sitake a lot of reassurance that the back end of their defense is shored up. A lot of the attention with BYU and their outlook on the season is like, well, Parker Kingston's out, so I just don't know how good they're going to be anymore. I don't have a lot of questions about BYU's and who they return on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary. So right now, they're number 6 for me. The difference between them and Ohio State is I have to use a little bit more projection with Ohio State. But like I said, I'm going with what their floor is, whereas BYU, I don't see them being much higher than 6 for what else I have coming down the pike on my list here. So I got the Cougars at number 6.
So they're kind of the opposite of Ohio State for you. This is their ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good stuff. I like how you kind of explain that. That's helpful. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
My number 6 is the Miami Hurricanes, and this to me is their floor. This is the lowest I'm going to see from Miami. I just there's some questions that I have about Miami that separate, because 4, 5, and 6 are all very close, and you'll have a better sense of why I have them at 6 compared to some others. But when I look at this Miami secondary, I thought they played good football last year, Trev, and they weren't an elite secondary last year, but they were much improved over what they were the year before, and they had some big losses. Right? I mean, obviously you lose Keontae Scott. That's a loss. They lost a couple of their safeties. They lost some depth. They do bring back some talented players. Xavier Lucas comes back at corner. You've got, Ethan O'Connor, OJ Frederick, and Damari Brown kind of battling for the number 2, 3, and 4 spots, right? Who's going to be there? Zechariah Poyser comes back this year. Bryce Fitzgerald comes back. I'm curious, is he going to be a safety? Is he going to be a nickel? That's a question I have about Bryce Fitzgerald. And then they got Omar Thornton from Boston College, and I'm very curious to see how they're going to use him. And that's one of the couple of the questions that I have is Keontae Scott was a really good football player for them last year. And I don't know that they have a natural, step in and do what Keontae Scott did last year. I also wonder if when I look at Miami, I see good talent, but I wonder if outside of maybe 1 or 2 guys, if some of these guys have this is just who they are. And there's not another place for them to go. That's why I say this is the floor for Miami, in my opinion, because this is just everybody kind of comes back and then they are who they are. Omar Thornton's kind of what he was at BC, and that he's an alley player. He's a box guy. He's a run defender. I think you recruit Omar Thornton out of the portal to help your run defense, and that's kind of what he brings to the table. Where do some of these guys fit? I've seen some depth chart projections that have Bryce Fitzgerald at nickel, some that have him at safety, some that have Omar Thornton at safety, some that have an Omar Thornton at nickel. Some of those question marks, and then just my overall question of, does Miami have the high-level talent like a DJ Pickett, like a Devin Sanchez, like an Ellis Robinson that has that big jump because of their God-given talent that jumps them up? That's my concern with Miami. And so when you lose a Keontae Scott, you lose a Jacoby Thomas. When you lose guys like that, I don't know that you've got that Leonard Moore guy stepping in like Notre Dame had when Benjamin Morrison went down, or like an Ellis Robinson, a DJ Pickett, a Devin Sanchez type of player that steps into the starting lineup and says, okay, I'm going to be a star. Xavier Lucas, maybe. But like OJ Frederick, maybe. But that's really the concern I have and that's why I love their floor. Not even concerned. They're the number 6 secondary in the country. This is really good. My question is, can they crack that top 5 is going to be, do we see jumps from guys in year 2, whether it's more comfort in the system, they become a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. That's kind of my question for Miami. And the thing that keeps them from my top 5. But this is a really good secondary, Trev. They're deep. They're smart. I just, like I said, do they have the high-level talent? That's my question. But this is going to be a really – and dude, they turned – that secondary 2 years ago was abysmal. And they were real solid last year. This is projecting them to be actually better than they were last year because of them. So I'm already projecting the year 2 in the system growth, because I don't think they had a top 6 secondary last year. They were good. They were 10 to 12. That's why they went to the title game, but they weren't 4 to 6. This is already taken into account that year 2 projection, but can they go beyond just more comfort in the system improvement? That's going to determine whether they can climb higher than this.
No, it's good stuff. Let's crack into the top 5 here. And my number 5 team, I'm actually staying in the Big 12. I'm going with the Texas Tech Red Raiders. One of the things that I love about this secondary, again, I talked at the beginning of this segment about how much I love continuity, and this is one of the few teams, in not even just in the top 10 list, but just in the country, that didn't have to go to the transfer portal to fill needs in their 2 deep. Now, they got some transfer portal guys But, they got like Dante Balfour from Charlotte. They got Cole Wisniewski from North Dakota State and Amir Boyd from UTEP to kind of fill out some like rounding out depth pieces, but they return a lot from this past season. I mean, they returned both of their starting outside cornerbacks and their safeties. Amir Boyd comes back, Bryce Pollock comes back, John Curry comes back, and then Brendan Jordan also comes back. And then I'm going to butcher his last name, but Malik Esquera. I can't roll my R's when it's the double R's, unfortunately. But he's a 6'3", 205-pound, basically just defensive back. And I think that he also might rotate in at one of the safety spots and then bump John Curry, to like their star position. That's basically their nickel. And he played a little bit of that last season. So you have a very long and lengthy secondary. You have a very experienced secondary, and it was extremely productive. They finished 2025, number 26 in yards per game, 9th in interceptions, 33rd in completion percentage, and 6th in touchdowns allowed. Now, again, very similar to BYU, I have this being somewhat of their ceiling. Here's the question that I have for Texas Tech. I think their secondary benefited quite a bit. You're going to see a common trend with this with my number 4 team as well. They benefited from having just an unbelievable pass rush last year. Is Texas Tech going to be able to replicate that? I'm not sure, because as much as I like the experience and the continuity on their back end, they don't have a Devin Sanchez. They don't have an Ellis Robinson. But what they do have is a really solid group of guys that if their front four can take care of business, they're as productive of a group as what you're going to find, especially in the Big 12. Again, they got blown out by Oregon in their first round in the quarterfinals of the playoffs. I do not think it was because of their secondary. I think Oregon showed up in the trenches. That's going to be the biggest thing.
Dude, they gave up 23 points. Like, they didn't get, it wasn't 43. You know what I mean? Like, I'm backing your point. Like, it wasn't 43-20 and they got beat by 2. It got beat 23-0. You know what I mean? Like, they only gave up 309 yards and 3.8 yards per play to to Oregon. Like, their defense didn't get wrecked by Miami. It was like, what, 10-0 at halftime? Something like that. Like, they got beat because their offense got destroyed by Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, if I'd have told you before the game, Oregon's only going to score 23, you're like, dude, Texas Tech might pull off the upset. You know what I mean? Like, seriously. So to your point, Trev, they didn't get beat in that game because of their defense got proved to be frauds. You know what I mean? Like, that was one of Oregon's lowest outputs of the season. Their offense sucked in that game. That's why they got blown out in that game. So And the John Curry kid, you mentioned John Curry. I didn't count him as a secondary. He's 6'2", 235.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they kind of use him kind of like Notre Dame used Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which is like, do you count him as a linebacker, a DB? He's listed as a DB. I saw PFF list him as a corner. He's a slot. He's a slot, but that was an interesting one that I looked at for them for sure. My number 5, Trev, is the Indiana Hoosiers. I know they lost D'Angelo Pons. I get it. And that's a big loss for them. And he was a big time player for them. And Lewis Moore was a really good player for them. But what I like about Indiana is, number one, they bring back Jamari Sharp. They bring back Amari Farrell. They bring back Ryland Gandy. I always get him wrong. Rayland, like Raylan Givens. Ryland Gandy, kid from Georgia. Notre Dame actually offered him coming out. Didn't really recruit him super hard. Byron Baldwin played a lot last year. The fact that they play so many guys in just their normal rotation is why I don't think they're going to suffer as much from losses. They were able to get some good players. And what Indiana did smartly is, when they went to the portal the first 2 years under Cignetti, they got a bunch of portal guys that had multiple years of quarterback. Now, I know at quarterback, multiple years of eligibility. At quarterback, they got one and dones. At running back, they got a couple one and dones. But at a lot of positions like Ryland Gandy, D'Angelo Pons, Amari Farrell, they got guys with multiple years of eligibility left. I think Jamari Sharp was also a transfer. I'm actually looking him up now. I thought he was a transfer. I could be wrong. Yeah. No, he played in Indiana's whole career. I thought he was a transfer for some reason. But they've got talent coming back that played a lot. And then they went to the portal and once again did well. Preston Zachman's a kid from Wisconsin that I like a lot. He was banged up last year. 2 years ago, he was a really good player for Wisconsin. I think he'll step in well to that safety position opposite of Amari Farrell. They got A.J. Harris out of the portal. He's a kid that started at corner for Penn State 2 years ago for a team that went to the semifinals. He'll battle with probably Ryland Gandy for the starting job, but he's going to play a ton. So I really like this football team. They got another Jaquan Sanks comes in to provide depth. There's a lot of depth there, Trev, but there's also really good talent, a lot of experience. You talk about continuity. That's a reason I'm super high on Indiana, because they have a lot of continuity and they're not having to replace D'Angelo Pons with some kid who's never proven himself. It'll either be a guy who started for a playoff team 2 years ago and has played thousands of snaps of college football from Penn State, or Ryland Gandy, who played a bunch of football for them the last 2 years as part of their rotation. And that's why I think they keep things rolling in the secondary. And their pass rush is going to be pretty good as well.
Yeah, the Indiana pass rush is going to be solid this year. I get you completely. My number 4 team is the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I think both Texas Tech and Miami benefited from having amazing defensive line play in 2025, but there's a separator in between why I put Miami at 4th and Texas Tech at 5th. One, I have more confidence that the Miami pass rush is going to be more effective this season than what is the Texas Tech pass rush. Not by a wide margin, but they returned Justin Scott, Ahmed Moten, Marquise Lightfoot. They got Damon Wilson out of the portal, one of the bigger portal acquisitions from this past really cycle. And so I really have a lot of confidence in that. But then the other separator is Miami has the experience. They have a lot of continuity, and 4 of their guys all played or started in the national championship against Indiana and performed relatively well against the Heisman Trophy winner, who didn't throw a passing touchdown, and a really good underrated receiving core in what Indiana had this past season. But you go through and you look at who they bring back. They have O.G. Frederic, Xavier Lucas, Ethan O'Connor, Zechariah Poyser's coming back. You know, they were a very productive defense last year. I'm with you. I'm very intrigued by the Omar Thornton pickup from Boston College. I'm not entirely sure where all he's going to fit in at. To your point, I could see it being nickel to replace Keontae Scott, or do they just add him to the rotation at the safety spot? Miami, again, is another team that I'm going more with the ceiling here. Because of the 3 teams that I have ranked in front of them, I don't see them being higher than 4th, because I don't think that they have the overall top-level impactful talent that what my next 3 teams are going to have. But this is a very veteran group. And look, if your ceiling is the 4th best secondary in college football, you're doing pretty okay.
And my floor was 6, maybe 7, right? That they're going to be a really good secondary this year.
Yes, absolutely, man.
We agree. The thing that keeps them from those other groups is I just don't all the other teams we talk about that could jump into the top 3, that are in the top 3 or 4, all have like star power. I think Xavier Lucas is really good. I think O.J. Frederic is really good. I'm with you, Trev. Like, I just don't know. Could the sum if the sum is as good as the individual parts, like, okay, like that's great. But like these other teams have good all around too, but they also have a couple like studs. And I think that's the thing that's right now keeping Miami from being in the conversation. And that's why their range is more like 4 to 7 or 8. But again, it's still a top 10 secondary. You can win a lot of football games with top 10 secondary, especially if your pass rush is legit with Marquise Lightfoot and Damon Wilson and Justin Scott and guys like that. So it's going to be interesting. My number 4, Trev, is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Very, very, very heavy Big Ten flavor in my top 5. Ohio State's an interesting story, Trev, because there's some aspects about Ohio State this year that I'm a little concerned about, but secondary is not really one. I don't think their safety room is going to be as good as it was last year. Like it just won't be, in my opinion. What I like about this team though is I like their depth a little better. I think their cornerback room is going to be better. I like Jermaine Matthews a lot. I think Devin Sanchez is going to be a star. I actually was not super sold on him as a corner coming out of high school. I thought he was an elite talent, but I thought he might have to move to safety. He showed me last year that he's got the chops to play corner. And he was really good for them last year as kind of part of that rotation. To your point from earlier, now he's got to show that he can be like the guy. I think he will be. 6'2 plus, really fast, really athletic. Played over 300 snaps last year. He'll benefit from that now that he's the guy. And the big thing for Ohio State is this all is based on the assumption that Terry Moore is going to be the player he was at Duke before the injuries. If he's not, I think the safety room could take a step back because they lost two absolute studs. Jalen McClain is not a stud at safety, but he's a good football player. The safety depth is a little shaky to me, but I love the corner depth. Getting Earl Little Jr. out of the portal from Florida State to play the nickel is a good pickup. It'll be a lot like getting Devontae Smith was for Notre Dame last year. It's not a star, but he's a vet. He knows what to do, and he'll do his job every snap. You just hope that he can stay healthier than what Devontae was for Notre Dame. Devontae was solid when he was healthy. So I just think the potential of the star power at a couple spots at corner is why I have Ohio State there. This is they're my ceiling. I went with a lot more ceiling rankings with some of these guys. A couple teams I have floor rankings, so like there wasn't true consistency. It really come down to feel and gut. And the other part is like I said, this is a program that's proven that they can develop big time players. I just think that Jermaine Matthews and Davidson Igbignosin from last year won't be as good as year 3 or year 2 Jermaine Matthews is a starting lineup in Devin Sanchez. And that's just, again, that's a little bit of projection, but that's why I see it the way I see it. And I think Earl Little Jr. is a better football player than Lorenzo Styles. He won't test like Lorenzo Styles, but that'll be an upgraded nickel, a definite upgraded nickel. So I really like this secondary for Ohio State. It's the only position group on their defense that I'm like, dude, that's going to keep rolling. The other two I have some question marks about, D-line and linebacker. Not that they're going to be bad. They're not going to be bad, but like, are they going to be as good as they were the last couple of years? I don't think they will. This unit, I think, is going to still be really good.
Let's dive into the top 3 here, Brian. And I know this is where we have an identical list. And so we'll kind of tag team this here a little bit. But our number 3 is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And again, I'm going with ceiling here. And this is why. The talent's there. I really believe that it is. I just don't know if the coaching is there yet to get the talent to where it needs to be. That's how I look at this secondary. Okay, I like Xavier Brown at cornerback. I like Keon Sabb as a prospect at safety. And then Bray Hubbard's kind of one of those where it's like, I don't think he's a stud. He was a productive player, but I think there's a reason why he had so many opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some limitations to his game, but he's a playmaker. He makes big plays.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Hubbard finished third on the team in tackles and then first on the team in interceptions. So he takes advantage of the opportunities that he's given. Xavier Brown, who's credited with 5 passes defense, 2 interceptions. Keon Sabb was credited with 3 passes defense, 1 interception. I think Dejon Lee is going to step up at the other cornerback spot. He played 15 games in 2025. Big kid, 6'4", 202 pounds, played 586 snaps last season, but I think he only started a handful of games. He was also productive. He's going to have to take the next step. So the pieces are there for Alabama to have a top 5 secondary in college football. It's just, will Kalen DeBoer invest enough time on the defensive side of the ball to make sure that they're that, or is he going to be more of what they were at Washington? That's the questions that I have.
Yeah, I think that's something that's holding Alabama back, Trev. The talent is in the room. There's no question about it. Their safety room, Keon Sabb was a good football player for them last year. He's going into his second year in the system. Remember, he transferred over from Michigan, where he was expected to be a big-time player. They got depth there. Ivan Taylor, former Notre Dame commit, is part of their 2 deep. They've got Dre Kirkpatrick. They have if Joey O'Brien is not the best high school safety in 2026, it's the Edwards kid that's at Alabama. Like, to me, those were the 2 best safeties in high school football in the 2026 recruiting class. Big time player. I think he can come in and help them as a freshman. I think he helps them out quite a bit. They've got depth at corner. The question that I have is what happens like their nickel spot? I think they call it like Husky or something like that. What happens there? Is it going to be Red Morgan Jr.? Is it going to be Xavier Mincy? Do they move somebody else there and kind of move their cornerback group around? That's really the big question that I have. But, man, big-time talent. You talked about Dejon Lee last year. I think he was a freshman last year, I believe, Trav. I think he was. Wasn't he a true freshman last year? Or was he a redshirt freshman last year? He was a true freshman, wasn't he? I'm looking that up right now.
I thought he was a true freshman, yeah.
Yeah. But he comes in and plays a lot and is very productive. So yeah, he was ranked high, top 50 national recruit. No, I don't care about that. I care about how you play when you get there. And when I look at this kid as a true freshman last year for Alabama, he allows 3 touchdowns, has 2 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, allows 18 catches on 31 receptions, right? Similar number. But he only plays 586 snaps, which is, I think he was like 3rd most amongst the corners. Let me look that up real quick on PFF. He was 3rd amongst the corners last year. Because remember, Damani Jackson was there. They had Xavier Brown. So he was 3rd amongst the corners. Actually, 2nd because Damani got hurt. That's right. But I thought he had a really, really good freshman season, and he's only going to get better, in my opinion. And, Xavier Brown's a good football player. He had a solid season last year as well, Trev. So I think there's talent there. As you mentioned, how's it going to be coached? They get their hands on a lot of passes as a cornerback group. They have a lot of disruptive corners. Their safeties are playmakers. The issue for Bama is what's in front of the secondary this year. Now, last year, I thought they were a little overhyped. They were young in some spots. I think Damani Jackson was overrated. But I really like this group that's coming together because of some of the young players that are emerging and then some of the arrivals. So Bama's going to be a really good one this year. Really good one this year. So I think that there's a clear difference between them and 1 and 2, but it's not like they're way behind. But I also think there's a clear gap between Bama and everybody else. I don't know that anybody else we talked about, LSU, Ohio State, any of those teams that I'm really high on, can jump into the top 3 unless one of these 3 has a disappointing season. I think these are the clear top 3 secondaries in the country. The only real question I have about Bama is exactly the one that you said. It's what's on the sidelines, not the ones that are on the field. Bama fans may not like that. I don't know if maybe they agree with us. I don't know. But my bigger question is Kane Womack and the people coaching those guys. It's not the talent on the field.
100%.
I said this to you before the show. If Kalen DeBoer doesn't, if he ever figures it out on defense, either A, gets Kane Womack to do better, or B, goes out and hires a better real defensive coordinator, this defense will get better in a hurry because they don't lack talent. I've been watching the D-line last year. We're studying Keon Keeley tape and we're studying James Smith tape, and you're like, they're either have got the dumbest alignments I've ever seen up front, or they don't know how to line up on defense. Maybe both. They were so poorly coached on defense last year, just schematically and technically, and still put up good numbers. Why? Talent. That's where I'm at. But if they ever figure it out on defense, coaching-wise, this defense is going to be outstanding because they have plenty of talent, especially in the secondary.
Agreed completely. Our number 2 team is the Oregon Ducks. And like you mentioned, how there's kind of a gap between, 1 and 2 and then Alabama at 3rd. I think Oregon might have the most complete secondary outside of my number 1 team returning in college football. They have a cornerback duo that I think is, look, I talk a lot about how I think Notre Dame has the best cornerback duo in the country. That cornerback duo up in Eugene might have something to say about it, man. I really think that Brandon Finney and Ife Obadegwu.
Just call him Iffy.
Okay.
If he's a dude. That's all you can say. If he's a dude.
Those guys are dudes. Those guys are certified dudes. Brandon Finney broke out in the postseason, and he was giving Baron Morton a heck of a time during their playoff game. I mean, honestly, he was a very talented player. And then Iffy is another really talented guy as well. Strong cornerback duo. Shout out to Brian, because I can't take credit for this. I completely forgot that Coy Parrish transferred to Oregon. I did. Truthfully, because I was going back and forth between, Alabama 2, Alabama 3. I had questions about Oregon safety room. And yes, I understand they're returning Aaron Flowers as well, but Coy Parrish coming in solidifies the back end of that defense. Carl Williams, a transfer from Baylor, is likely going to slide in at the nickel position. Still a question mark, something that they're going to still have to sort out in the spring, but you combine talent and production upside. I think Oregon has all of that. That's why they're at number 2 for me.
Yeah, Trev, this is a great secondary. It was good last year. but it was young. Well, I shouldn't say it's a great secondary. It can be a great secondary. It's an extremely talented secondary. They were young last year. Brandon Finney was a true freshman last season. Ife Obadegwu, that's my best guess at it, Trev, was I think it was a redshirt freshman last season. I'm trying to look that one up. Yeah, I think he might have been a redshirt freshman last season. I'm actually trying to look at that now. But he's a guy that I look at too, Trev, and say that he was young and relatively inexperienced last season. So these are two very talented. He's a redshirt freshman last year, so I was correct on that. From Maryland, he was a big time player, very talented player, physical kid, over 200 pounds. Brandon Finney just scratching the surface, and they had another stud freshman cornerback last year, Naeem Offord, who had a little bit of a rougher transition that gives them a third extremely talented young player. And I could see one of those three ended up playing some nickel at times as well, Trev. This is a very talented secondary. They have depth. The young guys played a ton last year. Aaron Flowers is a redshirt freshman. They've got Peyton Woodyard, if you guys remember him. Jet Washington, they signed out of high school. So, yeah, I know they lost a couple players. Theron Johnson was a really good veteran player. I thought he was a little overrated based on how some people thought about him going into the season. It doesn't surprise me that by the end of the year, Ife and Brandon Finney were, in my opinion, their two best corners. Dylan Thieneman is a physical freak. I think Coy Parrish is arguably a better football player than Dylan Thieneman. He won't perform at the combine like Dylan Thieneman had, but I just think he's a better football player. So I really like this secondary. And they're going to have a really good D-line in front of them. Because everybody talks about all the players Oregon lost in the portal. Notre Dame benefited from one of those players getting Tion Gray. None of those guys started. Their entire starting D-line comes back from last year. And they still have Elijah Rushing and Aiden Breland and Nasir Wyatt on top of all the portal guys. You know what I mean? So this Oregon defense is going to be outstanding again this year. And their secondary is a big reason why. And the reason I don't think that Bama can catch them unless Oregon takes a step back is because all the things you could say about Bama, some young players, they were just as young, if not younger, in the secondary at Oregon last year. They were just coached a lot better.
Yes.
If you flip coaching staffs and you take the Oregon players and put them in Alabama and take the Alabama players and put them in Oregon, we might be talking about Bama being number 2 and Oregon being number 3 because of the same reason. But even then, I still think the talent, overall talent at Oregon is slightly better. The talent is debatable. How they're going to play on Saturdays due to how they're prepared and coached, that's where the gap is between those two. But this is a very talented secondary. And if you were to say, if somebody said, hey, Brian, do you want to come on our show and debate this Oregon guy about who has the better secondary in college football? Yeah, I'll do it. But I'm not going to go hard at the guy because I probably will agree with a lot of things he says. And if he's not a homer, he'll agree with a lot of things I say. These, to me, are the clear 2 top secondaries in college football. You have Oregon 2. I have Oregon 2. And then, of course, we both have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish number 1. And I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of people in college football preseason rankings are going to agree with us. This isn't a homer pick. This is, you got the number 1 cornerback in the country coming back, and that's not just our opinion. That's everybody's opinion. He was a unanimous All-American last year or consensus All-American? He was a unanimous last year, wasn't he? As a true sophomore, he comes back. Christian Gray's played a ton of football. DJ McKinney's played a ton of football. You have arguably the best safety tandem in college football coming back next year. And you have a loaded group of young players. Dallas Golden was a big-time recruit. Mark Zachary's a top 100 player. Ethan Long was a 4-star recruit. You have arguably the best fresh, because when we spent a lot of time on our corner and safety previews, we didn't spend a ton of time on the freshman class, which was arguably the best freshman class in college football. There's nobody that has the high level talent combined with the depth and experience that Notre Dame brings to the table. There's really no weaknesses outside of, okay, who plays where? That's the questions. The talent is elite. The depth is elite. And I think they're the clear number 1 secondary in my view. That's why I would still go on the show and have the debate, but I'm not going to be like, you're nuts for thinking Oregon's number 1. I just think Notre Dame is Brandon Finney's going to be a stud. Leonard Moore already is a stud. Their safety duo has a chance to be outstanding. Notre Dame's already is outstanding. You know what I mean? That's why Notre Dame gets the nod for me.
Yeah, they check every box. The biggest question is because even I'm with you. Like, where is somebody going to play? But is Christian Gray going to be better at field or nickel? Well, we've seen what he is at field, and when he's healthy, he arguably has the highest ceiling in the room of anyone not named Leonard Moore. That's truthfully how good Christian Gray could be. Again, it's a could. Or it's okay, does DJ McKinney step up? It's like, okay, well, we have a sample size, a season long sample size of what he's looked like alongside a Heisman winning corner. Now, he didn't win the Heisman because of what he did at corner. But point being, he was alongside a star power talent in Travis Hunter in 2024, and he was a pretty darn good corner. Safety, we spent a lot of time today talking about that duo on the back end with the Don Schuler and Tay Johnson. The biggest question that I have about this entire group, and really this is for every level of the defense at Notre Dame, is just how does Chris Ash utilize him?
Yep.
I have zero questions about the talent top to bottom in this secondary. No.
Yep. Including injuries, being able to sustain injuries and still be really good. If Notre Dame doesn't have one of the two best secondaries in college football this year, there's going to be two reasons why. Reason number one is Chris. Reason number two is Ash.
Honest.
That's it. He's like, let's just play a bunch of cover three. Keep it ball in front of us. That would be the only reason why. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm just saying that would be the only reason that they're not.
Yep.
And I have to think Chris Ash is smart enough to look at his roster and say, okay, we've got some dudes. Let's go let them play football.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Notre Dame is numero uno for me.
Who are some teams that were kind of on the cusp as we wrap this up today, man?
Yeah, I had a lot, Trev. Obviously, the two Big 12 teams that you had on your list, I had. So with Texas Tech, the reason I didn't have them there is big part of it is I just don't count John Curry as a DB. So that you take that production out of the discussion, I think that if I were to told you before the show, hey, Trev, you can't count John Curry as a DB, I think that changes your calculus a little bit. But you don't have to. You can count him however you want. I'm saying that's the reason I didn't have him there. And, like losing Cole Wisniewski, I think is going to hurt a little bit. And I like that secondary. Bryce Pollock's a really good player. I think they got really good corners. Safety is really more of my question mark other than Brendan Jordan. I don't know that I feel great about who steps in there. I still like them quite a bit. I think Houston was in my conversation. Arizona State had a really good portal year in the secondary, but I couldn't put them in the top 10, Trev, because that's pure projection. Their two deep's going to be well over 50% portal guys, but they're a team I'm keeping my eye on. Arizona also had a really good secondary last year. They lost a couple guys. They had some guys coming back. They were in the conversation for me. Virginia Tech, Florida. Here's a team that I couldn't justify putting in the top 10. It's another team, Trev, that I think has some very interesting portal. There's some portal teams here or some portal pickups here that how they perform is going to go a long way towards determining how they are. And that's Tennessee. Like they lost a stud corner in Colton Hood. But when you look at like a lot of the rest of their depth chart, they've got some good players coming back this year. There's certainly some talent to work with there at Tennessee. But they also had some portal players from like how this guy pans out is going to go a long way towards determining how good they're going to be. But their starting lineup is going to be all but maybe one portal guy. Kyan Lee that got from the portal from Auburn. You got TJ Metcalf from Michigan. You got DeJuan Lane from Penn State. You got Quay Moss at nickel, who they got out of the transfer portal. A lot of their two deep. He's from Kansas State. A lot of their two deep is going to be portal guys. They got Ty Redmond coming back. Idris Farouk comes back. They lost a lot of guys. Some of those guys I think are kind of addition by subtraction. I wasn't a big fan of Andre Turrentine, and some of those other guys were just like nice players. But it's all when you're depending this heavily on portal guys on defense, Trev, it could be hit or miss. And they're doing that on all three levels. Xavier Gilliam, Chaz Coleman at that defensive line. You've got Amari Campbell, at linebacker. Your secondary is almost entirely made up of portal guys. So they're a big question mark for me, but there's a lot of talent there. They remind me a lot of Miami secondary last year. where you lost a bunch of guys, but you're kind of like, that's not a bad thing because the guys they lost weren't very good. And you added a bunch of talented transfers. Let's see how the D coordinator can fit them all together. Corey Heatherman did a brilliant job of doing that last year. Can Coach Scott do that this year? That's going to be or Coach Banks do that this year? That's going to be the big question. If he can, then I could see Tennessee jumping into this list as well.
No, I like those. A lot of mine on the radar teams are ones that you had in your list as well. Like Michigan is on my radar. Indiana is on my radar as well. I might have put a little bit too much weight into them losing D'Angelo Pons. The other thing that I had in my list is of those 10 teams, I can confidently say, like, okay, I think one of the sides of the field at corner is going to be shored up. Indiana has a lot of talent at their disposal and a lot of good experience. I just don't know. I can't confidently say who that guy is going to be for them. But they have
to replace Pons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I can't confidently say, oh, okay, like it's now this dude's turn. Like with Ohio State, it's like I can confidently say that it's Devin Sanchez. So that was what kept Indiana out of my top 10. But they were close.
I get that. You're not as high on Jamari Sharp as I am, which I understand. I get that. I think he's the guy that steps into it. The thing for me is like I never thought that AJ Harris was a great corner at Penn State. I thought he was a good corner at Penn State. And he started on a team that had a pretty darn good defense that went to the semifinals in 2024, and he was a starter on that team. So I don't think they're going to have the star there, but I think Jamari Sharp's a really good football player. I think he's the guy that ends up replacing D'Angelo Pons to a large degree. I mean, he gave up fewer receiving yards last year, higher completion percentage, fewer big plays, more yards after the catch. Like there's some give and take on there. D'Angelo is so flipping fast and so productive, and that's what made him so good. To me with Indiana, it's the sum being really good more so than like a couple individual parts being really good. So I get you on that one, but I just really like Jamari Sharp. What's some other teams you like, Trev?
Yeah, a couple of the other ones we talked about it a little bit at the time was LSU. My one concern, and I talked a lot about continuity. LSU is a little bit of a conundrum for me when it comes to that, because I agree with you. I do agree that they were woefully underused last year in their cornerback, but the guy that was woefully underusing them is coming back. That's the one thing that's interesting because I like Baker as a defensive coordinator, but I don't know if Brian Kelly was the one pulling the strings of like, I don't want this guy playing. He could have been. I'm not naive to that.
He was that way at Notre Dame. I don't know that he was at LSU, but he was definitely that way at Notre Dame. That's why I kind of assume that was the case. But like, if you look at their secondary at the beginning of the year, Trev, they're pretty good. I think they just, honestly, for me, I think they wore down because they were on the field so freaking much last year.
Yeah.
Because their offense was just a joke.
Yeah, very true. Well, very true. It's, again, teams like Indiana, Michigan, LSU, they were on the cusp for me. Same like how I know BYU and Texas Tech were for you. I know it wasn't, you had Indiana 5th and I had them 35th.
I didn't look at your list and like, okay, I don't want to tell him he's an idiot, but he's an idiot. Like there was none of that on your list.
Right.
You may have thought that about mine, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, there's 17, 18 really good secondaries coming like that I'm confident saying that's going to be a pretty good secondary right there.
Yeah, man. One of the
different reasons why.
One of the ones that I am keeping my eye on, and they're not on the cusp of being in my top 10, but two that I'm keeping my eye on. One of them is SMU. I think that secondary at SMU has a chance to be the strength of their defense. Some of that is by default because you lost all 4 of your starting defensive line. So it's like, it's like it's your strength, but like it's kind of what's the most polished of the, how the phrase goes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm keeping my eye out on them because they have a lot of athletic ability on the back end of that defense. It's just, can you come together and play as a unit? That's going to be their biggest thing.
Yeah.
Interested to see how that turns around. And the other one's Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech is a very intriguing secondary for me because they returned 3 starters. It's year 1 of James Franklin. The thing that I'm hesitant with is, yes, now their former head coach is now their defensive coordinator. A little bit of that LSU treatment of like, okay, you
wonder if did guys is Trev still talking in your thread? Okay, there you are.
Yeah,
okay.
I was. That's issue as old as time. Another story for another day.
Yep.
But yes, Virginia Tech is one that I'm keeping my eye out on in the ACC because I'm very interested to see what they do.
Yeah. No, I the weirdness of your head coach who got fired is now your D coordinator is going to be interesting. I think it says a lot about how he was viewed by the players. I don't think James Franklin is dumb enough to be like, I know you guys all hated this guy, but like, I'm going to bring him back as your D coordinator,
Right.
Like there clearly was he just isn't a head football coach. They're definitely one that to keep an eye on, Trev. There's no doubt. And there's some others, but I think those are the next groups that I'm like, and Texas A&M's another one.
Yeah.
That was on my cusp. They got some talent. Dalton Brooks comes back. How's Bryce Anderson going to be after coming back from the neck injury he suffered against Notre Dame, which I think cost him I don't think he played again the rest of the year. I don't think he came back. There's some question marks at corner. You got, Will Lee's gone, but they've got some guys coming back. They got some portal guys. Like they're another team that I missed earlier that was like, that's another potential on the verge team for me. So those are mine. But the LSU thing you talk about, Trev, that's why I said, like, for me, with LSU was the most projection that I had in my ranking. Like, you're not willing to take those leaps. I did, but I think we see their roster the same. It's very talented. And, the LSU's secondary is part of the reason why I think that defense is going to be fine this year. Because, like I said, you go back and look last year, beginning of the season, their defense looked a whole lot better than it did later in the year. And as Notre Dame fans, we've seen years like that.
Oh, yeah.
Where the defense holds up as long as it could, but eventually the dam breaks. And even then, it was just a few games where that happened. A&M, Houston in the postseason, but like Ole Miss, those are the only 3 games they gave up over 400 yards of offense. As bad as they were at times, I mean, their last 4 regular season games, they gave up 20, 22, 10, and 17 points and played 2 playoff teams in that stretch as well. But a lot of people remember how bad they got torched by Vandy and A&M.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, I just think there were some issues there up at the top of the program. And that was more of a Brian Kelly thing than anything. So I think that like DJ Pickett's like is a stud, but I'll admit there's a lot of projection there. I'll just say this, Trev. He played a lot more after Brian Kelly got fired than he played before Brian Kelly got fired.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of why I'm like, yeah, I have a feeling that that was a little bit more about old BK than it was anything else. So same thing, same with the other kids. So it was fun to put that together, Trev. But this is more than any other position that we broke down. I think this is the one where there's the greatest gap between the top 2 to 3 and everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I'm just happy that Notre Dame can be a part of that discussion.
Yes. And like any fan base that's being honest, you may not have Notre Dame 1, but if you don't have them in your top 3, then you're the homer. Not us. I mean, I think everybody is going to view this as a top 3 secondary. I think There can be some debate between 1 and 3. I just don't have a lot of debate between 1 and 3. I have a very clear number 1, a very clear number 2, and a very clear number 3. If there's one team, this is going to be a fun one, Trev, before we end. If there's one team that you look in your top 10 that you think you're going to be the most right, like that could prove us wrong in a positive way, makes a big jump, who would that be? And then what's the one team in your top 10 that you have the worst feeling about how they're going to take a big step back and like be not go from like your number Houston's 12, but like Houston would be 20th or Georgia's be 18. Like who are the 2 for you? And it just kind of popped in my head as we were going through this because like okay, how do we see this? So what would be the team that you think that you either have in the top 10 or just outside the top 10 that you could see having a big rise where they don't go from like 9 to 7, but like your number 9 could be 4, 3, or the team you have outside could jump in and be top 5. Who is that team for you, Trev?
Yeah, based on my list, it's the Ohio State Buckeyes. I had them come in at 7th, and I talked about how I see this being the floor for them. No matter what happens to their defensive line or what their linebacking core output's going to be, I don't see this group not being in the top 10. But if a lot of the projection that I have with Devin Sanchez comes true, if somebody else steps up at the safety position, like if Trey Moore is healthy enough to be that other piece in that safety rotation in the starting lineup, then man, this is going to be a much better secondary than 7th. So that would be who I have as my biggest riser. Yeah.
What about your other? Who would you say that you'd say, okay, if I'm going to be wrong about them, it's because they're going to have a big drop off?
I'm torn between 2, and the biggest drop off that I have, one of them, one of them is probably either Texas Tech or BYU. Again, I put a lot of weight and continuity in the experience you brought back to the table. But with a team like Texas Tech, I think a lot of their success was driven from their just outstanding pass rush from last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they made some impactful pickups in the portal, but they didn't get anybody that was going to replace David Bailey.
No one is going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick next year.
No. No, they didn't get anybody that was a David Bailey. And you could argue, I don't know if they got in anybody that's going to be a Romello Height, the counterpart to what David Bailey was. So that would be my other biggest one. And then one that I hate to admit because I am the fan of this team, and it has nothing to do with the skill level on the team, but it just goes back to how they're used, is Notre Dame. I was confident that Notre Dame was going to be a top 4 defensive backfield this past season. But you factor in the fact that Mike Mickens is now gone. I don't know what the Aaron Henry thing is going to be. And now that Chris Ash has all the keys to the car, I have no idea what he's going to ask his secondary to do.
I just feel like there's no way they drop out of the top 5, even if Chris Ash does what they did the first 2 games schematically. Because here's why. You're going to have Christian Gray playing nickel, not Carson Hobbs.
Sure.
You're going to have Tay Johnson playing safety, not Jalen Stroman. And as bad as the defense is, they're in game 13 of it, 14, 15 of it, not 1 in 2. Sure. That's kind of where I'm at. And the talent in the front 7 is just overall better than it was last year. But that could keep them from being number 1 for sure. Here's mine, Trev. So I look at my list. To me, LSU is that team that I could see going from 8 to top 4. For all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I think they're, because what LSU has, in my opinion, that some of the teams that I have between them and Alabama is they have the potential for elite star power that I don't know that Miami has, that Indiana has, that even Ohio State has, which I'll talk about in a second. So that's why I think when I look at LSU, I say, okay, maybe they're not there now, but if they put it all together, that's their ceiling. I don't know if they'll get to it, but that's their ceiling. I think LSU has the ceiling of a top 4 secondary this year. It's just there's a ways between where they are now. I projected them to 8. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like they're 8 and I'm projecting them to 4. I think right now, based on what we know, they shouldn't be in the top 10. For the reasons you talked about. There's a lot of uncertainty there. I'm admitted from the jump that they are the biggest projection that I took. So they could be all the way up. They could also be a team that ends up struggling and you're like, dude, I can't believe you ranked that second in the top 10. So they are actually both for me and to a degree, Trev. The other team for me is Indiana for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. What if they can't replace D'Angelo Pons? What if AJ Harris isn't who I think he is? What if Jamari Sharp, now that he's the guy, doesn't play to that level? I think that's a fair question. And then the other thing is, will the newcomers, Josh Burnham, the 2 kids from K-State, will they be able to give you what Stephen Daly and Mikael Kamara gave you last year from a pass rush standpoint?
Sure.
I think that's the other question that I have. Because if they have to cover, they don't have a Leonard Moore. I don't even think they have like a Christian Gray. You know, they don't have a Tay Johnson, a Don Schuler type of elite high-level talent to where if they have to cover an extra second or second and a half, that's the difference between an incompletion and a 35-yard gain or a 15, 20-yard gain. So that's a question. Then the other one's Ohio State. And Ohio State is because the safety question mark is big for me. You're counting on a guy who had a bad injury and missed all of last year to get back to being a dude. And that's a tough ask. And the other thing is their depth is a bit of a concern at safety as well. And yes, I think Devin Sanchez could be a dude, but what if he's not quite ready to be that guy yet? They could be a team that could be 4 and end up closer to 10. There's a world in which I could see Michigan having a better secondary than Ohio State. What Michigan doesn't have that Ohio State has is there's no one with just the talent of Devin Sanchez. Jermaine Matthews.
Sure.
But can they put it all together? And I also have some question marks about Ohio State's pass rush this year compared to last year. That's another one. So they're one. And again, I don't see them falling out, but I could see them dropping down to 8, 9, 10. I think Oklahoma is a team that could jump up a little bit, but they're also a team that could falter because there was a lot of ifs, if this, if that with them as well, Trev. So they're another one that I like a lot. I actually think Georgia could be a riser.
Yeah.
If they can kind of put it all together and find any kind of pass rush whatsoever, I think their secondary could jump as well. Because I've been down on Georgia's secondary the last few years, very down. But the young talent they have, but again, there are a lot of ifs. I could also see them dropping out of the top 10. What if DeMello Jones isn't ready to be the guy full time? What if they don't get a better pass rush? What if Ellis Johnson's just a really athletically gifted kid, but not a consistent football player? He's going to continue to give up those big plays. Then I could see them struggling a little bit more. What if the transfer kids aren't really that good? I have questions about Khalil Barnes' attitude. When you walk away and laugh at Dabo Swinney on the sideline, guy that's won multiple titles, I have questions about your attitude. And I just can't get that out of my head. So that's another one that I could see being a drop. But that's what made this so interesting, Trev, because the floor versus ceiling debates were very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Irish Breakdown podcast today.
We did have one quick
super chat.
Yeah, from Jari Z. Bear. I saw the USC canceled their spring game. They must have thought Notre Dame was going to be there. That is a great level of pettiness before we end the show. I just had to get that super chat in there because that was more of a statement than it was a question. So I did not see that, but that's kind of funny. We're a team that struggles with competitiveness. Let's not have a scrimmage where we can compete in front of people. Totally makes sense.
Add it to the list.
A roster filled with 30-plus freshmen. Let's take away one more opportunity for them to practice and get better.
Add it to the list.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. If you want some more IB content here in about an hour, the guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat. Starts at 5:05 p.m. They're talking about potential spring breakouts. So you're not going to want to miss that conversation. Brian and I will be back tomorrow. Time right now, TBD, because the Marcus Freeman press conference is happening tomorrow. So very interested to see what he covers there. Now, all the more reason to have that notification bell hit and to be subscribed to this channel so you know whenever we do go live. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, the best way to stay in tune, because spring practice does start at the end of this week, best way to stay in tune is be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We will see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.